much. There you go. So we'll start the meeting. It is 8:50. So committee membership for this year. We've just been discussing it a little bit, obviously, is myself, Tom Milligan, Scott Johnston as the rep from the select board, Sal Percia as the rep from the budget committee, and Mark Houston is joining us as an alternate, alternate appointed by the select board. And the reason for having an alternate, which we did not have in previous years, is sometimes quorum was a bit of a problem if somebody couldn't attend a meeting on a small committee like this. So it's great to have an alternate. Let me speak for a minute about alternate. We would expect the alternate to attend all the meetings and participate fully in all the discussions. The only question that arises, again, and the alternate can help us, allow us to make a quorum. Come back to that in a second. The alternate would not vote if we had a full committee in the room. But in the case where we do not have a full committee in the room, the alternate will participate in any votes. And as for this meeting, we would appoint Mark to be the replacement for Scott Johnston.
I'm not sure we can do that.
Why not? Oh, because he's yeah, you're right.
It's the official.
He's your ex officio rep.
Yes,
You're right.
yes, yes.
Well, from a quorum point of view only, we'll say that Mark is the rep in the room for Sal Percia today. That we can do.
How's that feel, Sal?
No,
Fine. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
And that's the whole reason why we had an alternate, because we knew that Sal would not make one or two meetings.
Okay.
It's Sal's intention, as he has told me, to make meetings as soon as he's medically cleared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't hear us before you arrived. Sal told us that he hopes to be medically clear, allowed in public in August.
Oh,
So I
good.
suggested, I'll put it on the formal record, we'll need to warn the public that Sal's gonna be out and around.
yeah.
Okay, so let's see, so that's the alternate, so
You said you talked about somebody that's on his way is not here yet.
Chet, the town administrator,
Okay,
he's not here yet, he's not officially a member of the committee. He and I discussed that as a matter of fact, a couple months ago as to whether or not that should change, and he pointed out some good reasons why, no, that should not change. The committee should be folks other than himself and Carrie Ann.
what's Chet's last name?
Hagenbart. I believe, maybe you can help, is it Hagenbart, right? I believe that, I got it on my computer feed. I believe. PH. I missed the H on the end.
Okay, okay,
So he'll be here shortly. He's on his way again. He is critical to the meetings, as you will see,
yeah,
as the town administrator has always been critical to the meetings. That's the person to whom the department heads, through whom the department heads funnel all of their requests for equipment and so on. And he usually teams up. Now, last year, the interim town administrator teamed up a lot with Carrie Ann, who again, as we said, was a great addition to the town. They teamed up together, but to bring that information to this committee for our review. That's really what it's all about. So now the next point of business number 2 is we need to select who is going to be the chair of this committee. I've been sort of doing that so far as a carryover from last year, but without.
I would nominate Claude to be the chair, please.
I second.
Well, you couldn't get that out fast enough, could you?
No, I couldn't.
Okay, I'll do it one more year, but I'll tell you what, Sal, next year you're gonna do it.
All right.
I'm gonna nominate you next year before you get a chance to nominate me. How's that?
Okay, all right. Yeah.
This will be about my 4th or 5th year in a row. It's time to let somebody else do it. All right, no, that's
Understood.
fine for me. Okay. And as I said, the only office we have in this committee, being a small committee, is the chair. We don't officially have a secretary, but I do appreciate Tom's volunteering to take the minutes. Okay, The next thing on the agenda, we'll look down to see if there's anything else, will be to ask Chet to give us an overview of the capital improvement planning from his point of view. I met with him briefly in a preparatory way a month ago. And learned that he's done a lot of work in this area, and he's developed a better computerized model for planning, for capital planning, than we had in the past. Ours was developed by Mike Sampson, and I'll give him credit. It was a tool, it was pretty good, but Chet appears to have a much better tool, and part of this meeting will be for him to tell us about that tool. He used it in his previous job in Killington, Vermont. Used it for quite a few years, and apparently it's a pretty complete tool. So he will tell us more about it when he gets here. And that's part of the reason for this meeting, so that we know what the tool looks like and how it's used and so on. And next meeting, we'll start to look at some real numbers, hopefully, for this year. Let's see if there's any other items on the agenda we can cover before Chet arrives. Let's see. Well, I think we're gonna want, I would like some input from Chet on the definition of capital. But very briefly, ever since I've been on the committee, which has been 6 or 7 years now, capital has been defined, as number 5 says in the agenda, anything with a gross cost in the aggregate of $5,000 or more. Now that number goes back 10 years. Perhaps it's time for us to consider increasing that number to something a little higher. Inflation, a $5,000 item is not what it used to be, right? A useful life of at least 3 years, and something that was non-recurring, that's not part of the operational budget every single year. Those kind of things have not been considered capital. So this committee, and Chet agreed when I met with him briefly, we probably should consider modifying this definition somehow. So again, we'll ask Chet for some input when he gets here. What do you guys think? The 3 of us in the room and Sal. Any ideas or proposals about modifications to that definition? Say again?
I mean, the only thing that would, merit some real consideration, I think, is the A1, the value of the minimum value.
I agree. My own proposal is I would suggest we go to $10,000.
Yeah. All right, well, why don't we, let's put that out there as let's try, see how Chet.
I'd like to get Chet's feeling on that, yeah, but I would propose, and we'll ask Chet when he comes in, what he thinks about that we go to at least $10,000. I personally like the idea of it's gotta be something that has a useful life of at least 3 years.
Yeah.
And certainly it should not be a duplication of stuff in the general budget. There's no value there.
Sure.
If it's recurring every year in the general budget.
What do we look at when we think of dollar value? 5,000, 10,000. What is it we're looking at?
What we're saying is
to distinguish a capital item from a operating item.
right. Well, again, this is the definition.
I know.
Even if it was a $20,000 item, if it comes up every year, then it's operating item.
Okay, I understand
Recurring.
that.
All right.
I understand that, but what can we use to judge whether it should be 10 or 5 or 20?
Well, just our general judgment, I think, and again, we'll look for some. I think Chet will be able to give us some good input on that. He just
Apologize for
So
the
let's-
delay. I got stopped 4 times for construction today.
Oh, goodness sakes.
It's been 1 normally.
Okay, good. So let's step back for a quick second. We'll make introductions.
Yep.
Chet Hagenbart. This is Tom Milligan,
How you doing?
Hi,
Tom?
Chet.
who
Nice to meet
is
you.
the at-large
How you
representative in the community. You know Mark? Okay,
Yep.
good. Sal Prasia is on Zoom. I
Okay.
don't know if you've met Sal, but
Yep.
How you doing?
Sal hopes he'll be medically cleared to begin attending meetings in August,
Okay.
so that's good. We just covered the first couple of items. The committee has appointed me again as chair,
Okay.
although I want Sal next year, I'm gonna appoint him. I'm gonna nominate him anyway. Let's see, in a minute, we're gonna go to the overview, which is item 3 on the agenda. But as you walked in, we were discussing item 5. We were
Okay.
able to start discussing whether or not we should make some change to the definition of capital. the definition we have, which is listed right here,
Yeah.
is at least 10 years old.
Right.
So the first point was Sal and I both thought the value should be increased based that it's 10 years more from 5,000 to something larger. I suggested 10,000.
Okay.
That's where we're at the moment. And we want to get your input, see what you think, what advice you might give us. But Tom was asking a question as you walked in, so let's go to that. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, what I'm asking is what criteria, what standards do we use to decide whether a capital item is a whether a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 item is a capital item as opposed to an operating item? I mean, the dollar amount, how do we rationalize, how do we decide what it should be?
Well, I mean, basically, and one thing we did learn is that through our audit, it turns out they're using $20,000.
Who's they?
The auditor, and they said that the town had set up a process for making it $20,000 for capital items. And I was like, well, that was a little high, in my opinion.
This time?
Yes,
Okay.
as part of our process. So what the committee has been operating under and how we're doing it financially don't match. We want to get
Okay,
those
let's
in
make
line.
it match. Yeah.
We want to get those in line,
Right.
number one. Number two, typically, I mean, typically, if you're going to spend more than, and you pick the amount of money, and it's going to have a minimum of a 5-year life, because that's typically your paybacks for things like that.
So this said 3, you suggest 5-year life.
I think a 5-year life,
That would
3
be your
years.
suggestion.
Yeah,
Okay, keep
I mean,
going.
because I think, and $5,000 or $10,000, that's just, what our preference is, and we could actually, as we start identifying all the issues in the budget, during the budget season, we could refine this definition a little bit, simply because we could say, well, there was an outlier that, we probably should capitalize this. And does that meet our definition? You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because you're
So,
gonna see
Couple of
something.
things, if I may, to pick up
Yeah.
on your points. Number one, just suggesting we go to a 5-year life instead of 3. I'd be okay with that. Secondly, you mentioned having the number that we use in this committee for this planning match what we do financially. Does that mean something that Carrie Ann does financially in the books and how she interacts with the auditor, or what?
It's how the auditor does the valuations of our assets.
Okay,
Okay, so basically, whatever this committee comes with, and the select board will have them adopted officially, so that then it can go, and the auditor
Okay.
will then start applying that
All right.
standard.
and so lastly, what I'm hearing is we could make a proposal today, but we don't have to finalize it.
Right.
We could let the season go on a little bit, postpone our final decision.
Well, we could operate under our proposed definition for a little while
Okay,
and see how we're
and see
doing.
how it goes, and we can modify it a little before we
Yeah.
make it public, which, by the way, it'll become public when we generate the report in October.
Right.
The annual report for the community.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad idea. Why don't we come up with an agreement today on a proposed set of guidelines, work with them through the season a little bit, and we'll make a point, if you could record it in the minutes, Tom, that we would finalize the definition before we generate the annual report in October. How's that?
Okay,
And I think to answer your question, Tom, will come out as we think about and look at the items. So we can start with $10,000, give or take, and we'll see how it goes through the season. How's that? How do we,
well,
let's use that as a temporary guideline as opposed to the 5,000.
you
Yeah.
mentioned the 20.
That was just how the auditors was told years ago.
But I also heard Chet
So-
say he thought that was a little high,
That's
and I
high.
agree.
That's high because there's a lot of items that I can think of that would be capitalized for less money than that.
Yeah. I think 20 is a little high as well.
I mean, the reality is, when we look at capital budget, infrastructure would be all capital, buildings and grounds, things would be capitalized items. And, I look at it and go, okay, we just repaired the roof on the senior center. And that was 20 grand, but had it only been 10, because we could have maybe done if we had a smaller piece of it, it's still capitalized because it still increases the life for more than 5 years.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's a reconstruction item. So I don't know. I don't think we should go higher than 10
Right,
at this
right,
point,
right, right,
and,
right.
and, you know, but if we find something that's like, that should be, you know, a
Okay.
capital budget item, but, you know, it may be. Yeah, I mean, I think the 5-year life and the, because even servers that are $20,000 are a 5-year life.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right,
So
right,
it's
right.
like, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
trying to think of what are things with the
Okay.
shortest lifespan.
So based on that discussion, I'll make a motion and we'll take a vote. My motion would be that we adopt a temporary definition to go forward for this budget season
Mhm.
of minimum 5-year life, a minimum a gross cost in excess of $10,000 or more to be finalized in October.
Yeah.
That's my motion.
I'll second it.
Seconded. All right, take a vote. All in favor, aye? Sal?
I thought I'm not voting on this because I'm remote, or? do you
No,
want me to
I
vote?
think you're voting. I think we agreed
Yeah.
you would vote, be able to vote.
Aye, aye,
You don't help us make a quorum, but you can vote.
aye.
All right, so it's unanimous. So that's what we'll do. That'll be our working definition for this budget season. 5-year life and greater than $10,000. All right,
And non-recurring.
and non-recurring, absolutely, and non-recurring. Correct. Thank you, Tom. Let's go back to number 3. I'd like to ask Chad to give this committee an overview of the new capital improvement planning tool. I say new, his capital improvement planning tool that he's brought with him. To help us understand how this is gonna work going forward.
Well, basically, it was designed, you know, it kind of started in a similar fashion to the way you guys have your spreadsheet for capital. And then we started adding variables and started to be able to calculate, to try and look at it. Basically, the design of the program is to look at the cost over life. Okay, so if, you know, we have, you know, $4 million worth of equipment in the highway department, or, you know, what is that going to be an annual cost? Because the goal of this program is to level your funding once you get properly funded. You know, so that it only changes technically by inflation. That's all. So we know that we're properly managing our long-term goals. So it does require things where, like in the case of equipment, you know, you will, if you're only going to spend $200,000 this year and what you should be putting in is 300, you still put the 300 in, spend the 200, and you build your program. So the next year when you got to spend 400, so you get a nice level program. It includes depreciation, it includes inflation, it includes, in the case of equipment, it includes trade-in values, it includes whether you have the option to put a finance number in there, because I know, given as far behind as we are with some items, we're gonna have to include some financing in this program. But the good thing is what we were able to do, where I came from, is once we got it properly funded, it took us 3 or 4 years to get us up to the proper funding level, because we didn't try to do it all in a year. It took 5 years of like financing trucks, but in year 4 or 5, we were back to buying them cash. Okay, so we just have to, we're probably gonna have to bridge that gap a little bit, and we'll figure out what that means as we go. You know, another good example, we were just doing an analysis because Carrie Ann and I had put together a spreadsheet that shows the last 24 years of budgets and how it compared to inflation, and just looking and how far behind we are. And then also, you know, how does that represent money we should have collected just by keeping up with inflation? And we were actually $17 million in accumulated loss over time, because in many years we were underfunded by like just following inflation from 2001.
Yeah.
Like that year we might have been pretty close, but then
Wow.
we were dropping, we kept going under, because then in 2000, don't quote me on the years, 9, 10, 11, 12, right around there.
Yeah.
For 5 years in a row, the budget went down each year,
Mhm.
the overall budget,
Oh,
but costs were going up.
That was before he even moved to town, so.
Yeah, I'm just,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is not, this is in no
hear
way,
you.
shape or form a judgment.
No,
of
no.
anything.
of course
It's
not. I
how do
just
we
didn't
get
know.
where
My
we are,
point is
so.
I didn't see that. Wow.
Right, so when you look at, and I have it on a spreadsheet that I would hand out, when we have our next meeting. But just to start going over, like, okay, there's where the problem is, you have to just maintain cost. I think the one thing that we haven't done is, and I'm going somewhat by Carrie Ann and others who were in the budget thing last year, that people on the budget committee were saying, well, we only budgeted this much last year, why would we budget that now? But our actual was 50,000 more than that. You budget based on actuals and real costs, you don't budget based on change in budget. Yeah.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
we want to make sure that we're looking at it, because the example I can give is we have about $11 million in road paving. Okay, if you were to pave all your roads this
Mhm.
year, it would be $11 million.
I came up with 16 earlier.
Yeah,
Wasn't
you
that
did.
far
He came
off?
up with 16.
Right on it.
So, but when you look at that and you go, okay, so in when we put this spreadsheet together, it was 2001 to 2024. The underfunding of $17 million was not doing the roads,
All right.
for lack of a better word, because technically we should have spent $11 million
Over that time on
over that
roads.
period of time, because that's the 20-year cycle I think we're trying to live with at this
Right.
point. So, and
Wow.
that does not include infrastructure, i.e. culverts and things of that nature.
Nah.
And
Right.
it doesn't include
Bridges,
re-graveling the
public
roads.
Oh, oh,
It's
yeah, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
You know,
just paving.
That's
pavement.
just the
That's the
asphalt
pavement.
on top,
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
because the one issue you're gonna find, and when we'll have this, and I'll give everybody a copy of, I have a Payzar manual we came up with, forget who did it, I think the one I got is from Illinois. But what it is it's a pavement grading system. Okay, and when you start seeing all they call them alligator cracks, that's your base has failed.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you don't fix that,
Everything else
it's
goes.
going to go with it, even when you pave new. And the other thing that people don't realize is, like, once you have a lot of cracks in your pavement, because actually the 3 or 4 years after you start paving, you'll see a couple of minor cracks.
Yep.
You're always going to. If you don't crack fill those, the salt goes through and it destroys your base, which then destroys your pavement. You know what I mean?
If
So
I may,
it's a whole
If I
process.
can redirect you for a second.
Yep.
Because there's gonna be a lot more discussion about roads and those kind of details. I'm more about, could you please tell us more? In fact, I want to ask you, were you gonna be prepared to show us the tool on the screen at all?
Today, no.
Today is, okay.
No.
I was hoping maybe we could take a practice run and having Monica display it on the screen and where you could show us the actual tool.
I didn't do
Okay,
that. The
all right.
tool, actually, and we're in the process right now of rebuilding the tool with all of the information from Canaan, because basically what I'm starting with is we have the equipment list and condition and costs and things of that nature. And then we also have the road inventory that was done by, I think a couple of the planning board people that are on the
Yes,
website.
yes, I know those two folks.
Yeah, so,
Andy Van Abs and Chuck Townsend.
yeah,
have
so
done the inventory,
we're
yes.
basically, that's what we're putting in as our start.
Yeah, correct.
And then we'll have to start.
That was a good start, I hope.
Yeah, well, I think it gives quite a bit of information. But when I have, and because the other piece of this is when you look at it on the tool, it talks about number of miles of the road, and then it says, what's your condition, but then there's a drop down box in a column that's basically, okay, the program assumes that you're kind of where you're supposed to be. And then it's gonna say, so the next time you do this road, are you just resurfacing it?
Mhm.
Are you milling and paving it? Are you reclaiming and paving it? Or are you reconstructing it?
4 different levels of,
Right, and they all have a different price, so this,
and your model is built such that it has essentially categories for each one of those, right?
that's correct.
By road.
Basically,
Okay,
because, and the inputs, the variables are, you can put in your per ton price, you can put in your reclaim and milling price, and then it'll change all the numbers to match,
right.
and you put an
Good.
inflation rate in the
Good.
whole program, and it calculates that in.
So that's the road piece of your tool. and
And then
accommodates
there's
all
the
that.
equipment.
Then there's an equipment piece. You have a place for trade-in values.
Yep.
I
Well, it's
will
actually,
say-
when you look across, almost everything is listed that you could possibly do with a vehicle. It's, the initial price, years of expected life expectancy. We're gonna pick 8 or 10 years or whatever the number is. And then it'll tell you what you have to appropriate annually for just that vehicle, and then you
Right,
get a
right.
total at the bottom.
Right.
And things of that nature, and then the trade-in values, whether you're gonna finance or not, what would the expected payment to be? Because what will happen is, once you do that, and this is all on a secondary sheet, on the primary sheet, on the budget worksheet, what it does is it then takes the number that's recommended and puts it in, all right, on a per vehicle basis, so you can see
Correct.
on a per vehicle
right,
basis.
that's what we want, yeah.
And then you will be able to then say, if we change this and finance it, it'll put it over, it'll change it, and then it also does the cash flow through. So this is our beginning balance in this fund. Goes through this year, what you're appropriating, what you're spending, and then what the carryover is. And what you'll
Right.
find is,
Right.
then there's also on that sheet, the year that it's the expected year for replacement. But then when you're doing the budget, you can say, well, we're gonna move this one up or move that one back, and you can change the date and it moves it,
Okay.
adjust
Right.
again for inflation. And then it will tell you, and then you could say 1 year, oh, the board doesn't want to put any money in this year, so when you put it in negative, it tells you what year you're going negative.
Right. Understand, yeah. Well, our old tool did a little bit of that, but this one, from what I've seen of it, does it even better. One question about the inflation you just mentioned, is that inflation variable
Yes.
in there different for each piece of equipment,
No,
or is it for the whole category?
no, it's overall inflation average.
Average,
So if you were gonna say, we're
same
at
inflation.
2.5%,
for
3%.
buildings as for trucks.
Well, you can do it that way, or for just equipment, you can
That's
do
what
it
I'm
with,
getting.
well, because the problem with equipment, and this is one of the things that you gotta keep in mind. The equipment changes, you can't predict them very well. Okay,
Understood,
we were saying 9 or 10% on trucks before COVID. And a 3% inflation rate wasn't really gonna keep up with that.
right.
So whenever you have the big differences, you have to, the other piece of this is keeping up with your replacement values. So you could do.
Correct.
You could do economic inflation in the program, and then you just have to keep
You have
managing your
to keep up
replacement
with the
values.
replacement values. I'm not sure I got a clear answer to my question. Inflation for, let's say, trucks.
Right,
Is it one inflation variable?
Yes.
That applies to all trucks?
yes.
Okay. Is it a different inflation variable that applies to, let's say, buildings?
It has
In your
been,
model.
typically it's an economic one, so it's overall, it's like, okay, nationally, we're gonna see
I
a
mean, your
3.5%.
model, does the Excel spreadsheet I'm asking you about?
That's what I'm talking about.
Do you have one spot for one inflation
Yes.
variable, or do you have one for each category?
There's one overall right
One
now.
overall. It's been my experience that the inflation that we experience is quite different between categories, meaning
Oh.
trucks versus buildings versus
Well, what I will
versus
tell you
other
is,
equipment, for
well,
example.
because if you keep up with
Computer
your,
equipment,
if you keep up with your your replacement values,
yeah,
basically, when we did this, because we also had a tax rate predictor I had for overall for the budget. And we came in on the money for the first 3 years and then slightly under for the next 4. If you keep up with the replacement values, it changes all of them. That's the key. You're gonna have a general inflation that you're using as a tool for planning. Okay, but replacement values pick it up, and the only place that's really a huge variable is on the equipment.
Yeah, I
So
think that's right,
replacement
Claude.
value
Claude, I think
Not
that's,
necessarily reflect
One second, Sal.
inflation.
What's that?
Replacement values of the equipment does not necessarily
No.
reflect the inflation.
Right.
They're two different things.
Right, inflation is being calculated through the program, and you basically have to just overwrite replacement values. So the replacement value, if it goes up 10% this year and you go in from a $275,000 truck to a $290,000 truck, that will fix everything in the system.
yeah, that makes sense to me,
So
Claude.
it's guided by replacement costs, not guided by inflation.
Inflation guides the whole program. But vehicles are inflating higher than inflation value right now, all equipment. And if you change the replacement value, that's the most accurate way to fix it. We can set in another inflation factor, but it still won't be accurate.
Let's give Sal a history. Sal?
Yeah, no, I mean, this was the same concept that we came up with last year, which is we want, new quotes basically on all the major equipment every year. And that way, that's the new replacement value. And the only thing that we took out of our formulas from last year, from 2 years ago, was the inflation factor. Because Carrie Ann felt that, a straight line would be easier as long as we got the replacement values updated on a regular basis.
So
I was
if I
always
may,
in favor,
guys-
I was always in favor of, both, having the, major replacement values updated on a regular basis and projecting some sort of, go forward inflation, which is what it seems you have, Chet. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's what it is. Like I think we were using 3%, the most recent one we did.
Yeah,
And-
but it's variable, so. Yeah.
So
Right,
if
and
I may, excuse me, I'd like to clarify a number of those points. Number one, we tried to do inflation.
Yeah.
Inflation in the old tool 2 years ago, and our old tool did not accommodate it very well. That's why we gave it up last year, because the old tool, the tool we had did not handle inflation well. That's number one. Number two, the quotes that you just mentioned, Sal, we agreed last year because we got burned the year before,
Right,
was that we would require quotes to be obtained by the departments for equipment they wanted to replace in the first 2 years of the plan. Not all major equipment every single year. but
right.
Rather, if they were saying they wanted to replace a dump truck next year or a backhoe the year after, we wanted to see a quote so that the replacement value number would be a good number. So I wanted to clarify, it's not all equipment every year, new quotes. It's equipment in the short term, first year or two of the plan.
correct.
The
But
third thing I
the
wanted,
goal- the goal for the inflation though is like, it's to determine if you assume a 3% or whatever it is inflation rate over the
Right,
next 10 years.
right,
It then calculates back to what you have to fund.
well,
Okay,
that's what I was gonna
it's
say.
about really about getting you to the correct funding level for the over time.
Right, the next thing goes to what Tom was saying, is inflation is for planning the future. Putting this variable in there
Right.
is about planning the future. Getting current replacement cost fixed is about what you know now. This is what that dump truck is quoted for right now. And I understand what you're saying, that somewhat adjusts things. However, I will still suggest one thing, and that is, if we were planning the future for trucks, we might predict future planning 8%. If we were planning the future cost of computer servers, we might only want 3%. They are very different by category.
Well, the only,
So let me
yeah,
finish.
go ahead.
If I could just suggest, as you're rebuilding your model, can you look at it to see whether or not you can have an inflation factor for buildings that's different from the inflation factor for trucks, that's different from the inflation factor for, let's say, other equipment like computers?
okay. One of the philosophical adjustments to the thought process is we're not, when you do your initial capital planning discussion, when this program is set, it's not about any of the equipment. It's about setting the value.
The value.
Okay, let's say it's
Yeah,
$300,000 a year we need to be putting in.
a viable financial
Okay.
plan, yes.
Then we go back and say, okay, which pieces of equipment fit in this? And we make sure that over the course of the next 10 years, everything has been replaced. So making sure that that number is correct. That's what the inflation rate covers.
Agreed. So therefore, the predicted inflation rate has an important bearing on that.
Yes, but the replacement values is what's going to dictate what you're spending on an annual basis, and it will adjust.
It'll adjust. I
It'll
understand.
adjust your next year's.
Don't get me wrong, it's better than what we had, what you're suggesting, but even better might be if you had an inflation factor variable for each category.
Yeah, we'll look into that, because the only place it would actually apply is in the equipment.
Maybe only equipment.
'Cause
I'm
everything
thinking
else-
roads, buildings,
Roads.
bridges, computer equipment, those things, the inflation factors on those are not at all like equipment.
No, equipment's the only one that's been really an oddball.
Yeah, it has been, really.
And that's the only one, if we were gonna apply an individual one, that's where I would do it.
So just think about it,
Yeah.
that's all I'm suggesting, that's all, just,
Well,
But
when we get it built, we'll look at
right,
it and say, okay, can
There
we
you go.
add that another variable?
that's all I'm asking, yeah.
Because my son's writing my code and it's in an Excel sheet.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
He wrote code behind the scene. All right, got
Yeah,
it,
and the
got it.
code that he wrote is like stupid.
Yeah, but what I would suggest, gentlemen, is that we take baby steps. Let's not get too
Oh, yeah.
ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm trying to get us to a, because it's gonna take us a year. I've only been here 3.5 months. You know, the way I see it is, we kind of we're gonna be looking at the big picture this year and say, okay, how far off are we really? And
Yeah,
as we
yeah.
refine this over the next 12 months, next year's will be a little tighter.
Right, right.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? And things like that. So I'm trying to get a model built so that we can do some real planning. I
Okay.
guess that's the key.
So,
Yeah.
So number 4 on the agenda, planning for inflation, I think we just had that discussion. That's what I had in mind on that. Number 5, we already settled. Number 6, discussion of scope. I know of scope questions or discussion that we should have in these areas: buildings, roads, vehicles, lower cost items, and so on. So let's take them one at a time if we could. Building maintenance. This committee did not in the past, and I want to emphasize the past, deal with building maintenance. We had CIP committee looked at new buildings or building additions, and we only had 2 in the plan in the past. One was the highway garage addition. And the other was a very rough, large number estimate for a town hall replacement of some sort. And that was all this committee ever had. I'm not saying that's what we're gonna do this year. I'm saying, what does this committee want to do regarding building maintenance? Now, when I say maintenance, we're talking roofs, maybe siding, maybe heating systems, maybe anything large. Does this committee want to be reviewing those things? Are they appropriate?
first-
And let me finish the question.
Okay.
And if so, where would the source of that information come from as to what every building needs?
Well, first, we probably want to not use the word maintenance.
Okay, got it?
We want to use building like capital improvements.
All right,
Because it's a capital improvement program that we're doing, like what we did on the roof. Has a 20-year life at the senior center. Okay, that
Oh,
will be
nice.
capitalized. That would be a capital item. That is a capital improvement. It's not maintenance. Okay,
okay,
so anything that we're going to do along those lines. And siding would qualify if it's failing siding and, now the painting of the library is not a capitalized.
painting is maintenance.
Painting is
I get what
maintenance,
you're
even though it's
saying, yeah.
$180,000. It's not a capital improvement.
Right,
Is that because it doesn't last more than 5 years?
Yes, because it's technically, like he said, if we paint. The one thing that Michael said was, he goes, there's almost no paint on that building. He goes, for as old as that building is, I would expect the paint to be like. And he said, it's not getting painted enough. And he goes, this is costing this much money because it's in such bad shape. Because if you paint this in 7 years, you'd spend like a quarter of what you're spending now. So it's like every 7 to 8 years needs to be something that's, and I would look at it as the capital budget committee should be making recommendations that says, okay, we want an 8-year painting cycle or whatever the number is to be in the operations budget. I think that would be recommendations because you're kind of going to oversee all of our assets. I mean, basically, this is the asset committee. All the town assets and how are we protecting them and maintaining them and making sure they don't fail. This is part of just the cost of doing business. So if you say, well, it's a $50,000 paint job, they just got to slap a coat of paint on it. Well, what's that going to be over 8 years? We need to put 10,000, make sure we start building. We keep things like that in mind for long-term planning.
Are they putting a sealer on that too? On the town office building down there?
Oh, it is, the way I read it, it's paint,
Just the paint?
Yeah.
Wow,
but yeah,
that's wall.
so I have a question regarding all that. Before I get to my actual question regarding buildings, let me use a different category as an example. Let me use trucks, highway equipment. Well, fire, whatever. In the cases of fire vehicles and highway equipment, the department head identifies what he needs, what he believes he's going to need to replace when. Says, I'm gonna need to replace that rescue vehicle 4 years from now. I'm gonna need to replace that dump truck 5 years from now, etc. The department heads own the equipment, They predict, they know the condition of their equipment best. They utilize the mechanic to help to inform them, but they identify what they need. Now, let me go to buildings. In Canaan, we do not have a buildings manager. We don't have a department head who will say, this is, and let's say we have 20 buildings. We have a lot of buildings. We don't have a department head that says this building is gonna need a roof in that year.
Mhm.
And it's gonna need a new boiler in that year. And that building is gonna need new siding in it. We don't have a department head who does all that. This committee is not gonna be able to do that. Who's gonna do that?
Well, technically, the town administrator is responsible at this point for getting you that
Identify
information.
what's needed.
And,
in what
and I,
years.
and we will be using contractors and different people to evaluate. We gotta get again, we need a report card of where we sit today.
Right,
And that's kind of the goal as soon.
So
as
you're gonna
possible.
coordinate that effort
Yes.
then? Okay. I
And,
think
and
it's
like,
important.
and that will probably be the one that it'll be kind of like the low hanging fruit this year. You know, what are the things that we're dealing with?
Right,
But, you know, that's the one thing that when you really look at it, it's probably gonna be a $50,000 or $60,000 a year,
oh yeah, it's a big one.
an applicant, you know, and being put into the capital item. And
In fact, my purpose for bringing up this discussion is, again, as I said, in the past, this committee did not review that stuff. I have no problem with this committee reviewing the plans, but somebody in the town has to put those plans together and bring them to this committee for review. That's the important part of that discussion, and that has not happened in the past.
just so you know, when we are complete with the program that we're building, there's a whole section for the buildings. And,
Good.
and it will be in there. What are
In
they
your
gonna
plan,
need?
in your
Yes.
tool.
It'll say, okay,
Good.
under town office, or actually, let's go senior center, you know, we have to do the other 3 sides of the roof. You know, and when are we gonna do it? So, because it turns out that supposedly 6 or 8 years ago, I guess somebody said they did the back roof of that building. But they just went over for a 3rd layer of shingles. They didn't actually fix it right. So that's gonna have to be redone also. So,
Right. Okay,
Michael, I know for the senior center, I'll have a very accurate list. And this building will have to learn, town hall, then the library, you know, we'll see where they are. But I know right now, I know something's failing in the town hall or in that building from a HVAC perspective. So
there you go.
there's a lot of these things that are going on.
I know another one too.
What's that?
When Bob was here, he was mentioning it to me at the highway garage. You can walk in through the door, right up on the front. When it rains really hard, he said, all that water comes right in like that and goes right down on the floor and right onto his desk and everything. Right in there.
Okay. Well, these are things we'll need to know.
Yep.
Exactly.
And also, and actually, I was sitting here one day waiting for somebody and I was watching and the sign out front was going.
So let's move it out of time. Let me move
Yeah.
it along. It's 9:30. We
Okay.
need to be out of here by 10. Road maintenance, we already
Okay.
discussed it somewhat. It's in your tool. And apparently you will coordinate the planning for I'm sorry, the new department head, whoever that is, will probably need to work with you to coordinate.
Yeah,
that,
we've
right?
already been talking about
Okay,
it.
good.
It's Bob the fourth. Bob Henry.
Pardon?
He's another Bob.
Yeah,
Okay.
And it's Bob Henry. He lives in town.
you're saying we've hired a,
Yeah, we've
highway
hired, he
superintendent?
starts on July 1st.
Oh, what's his name, please?
Robert Henry.
Robert Henry. Okay, good. I did not know that.
He actually came in last week, did his paperwork.
Okay,
And he didn't want to start before July 1st because I think he's done at Hanover in
That's
the
fine.
next week.
so July 1st is fine. Monica, I would think it would be great to advertise that in the newsletter so that everyone will know soon, either this week or next week. No, I read the newsletter from top to bottom and it's not
Okay.
in there.
Okay.
So that's
Who's
okay.
acting road agent right now?
Well, the only person that's kind of covering is Hugh right now.
Oh, Hugh.
Hugh,
He's just,
right.
because
So
the
Dale
paving
was- Dale's
project is-
retired, right?
Yeah.
Dale retired.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dale retired as of May 31st,
Mhm.
although he took the last 3 weeks as a vacation, so.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Vehicle maintenance, that we have not ever, and maybe we're gonna say we will not. Have vehicle maintenance in the CIP plan. I'm talking tires, snow plows,
Again,
Yep.
none of
Now-
that, right?
depending on the value. See, some of the, like a snowplow is gonna have a 5-year life and they're gonna cost.
The
quite a bit.
fixing of the plow, not.
No, the repair,
Not
no,
buying
you
them.
should not be doing anything,
No
no word
repairs.
maintenance should apply
There
to
you
any
go.
of this.
There you go. Fine. Agreed, no problem.
Yeah, basically, I look at it as assets. The thing that we're gonna be looking at, probably one big thing that hasn't been looked at by this committee is it's all drainage issues, whether it's culverts and bridges and there's gonna be a lot of conversation right there, because that's, if I were to say, what is one of our biggest deficiencies, it's drainage. You know,
Okay.
condition of the
Yeah.
culverts, some of them are filled up, like,
Right.
we're not draining properly,
Right.
our ditches are lousy. Because they gotta be deeper, they gotta get the water out from under the
Yeah, right.
roads, like that actually
Right.
all has, these things all are interconnected.
Right or wrong, I think the feeling in the past has been that drainage and culverts and all that was annual recurring work that the highway department needed to do every single year.
Right.
Go around town, clean
That's-
out all the ditches,
That's
repair
true,
culverts. And that we were not looking at specific culverts saying this culvert at the intersection of this road and this road is in the plan for. We didn't do any of that because we looked at it as a recurring activity,
culverts are not a recurring activity, they have a
Okay.
40-year life.
okay?
The
But
ditch
there are how
work,
many of them?
I have no idea.
I bet we have a couple of hundred culverts.
Yeah, we had 500 in Killington, so I'm sure you have a.
We probably have at least a couple of hundred. I do
Yeah.
not
Oh,
see
yeah.
this committee looking at a plan that says that culvert next year, that culvert 2 years later, that culvert.
No,
I
what
don't
you're gonna-
see us being
what-
able to do that.
What will happen is, well, the way I did it before, and you guys can tell me if you want to do this. All large culverts and bridges were listed individually with timeframes. Okay,
All bridges are. for-
bridges and
yeah.
large culverts, like whether
Okay.
if it was a box
Right.
culvert or something, if it was an oversized culvert,
Right,
those
right.
applied, they cost about the same as a bridge.
There you go.
Okay, but what we did is we had a line item that said culverts.
There you go.
Okay, and we would go,
Yep.
okay, we're gonna put in, we have 300 culverts, which means we need to do 10 a year.
10 a year.
So we put 10 a year.
Recurring activity is what I'm saying.
But
That was,
again,
that was a
but
general
they-
budget.
But I will say that the interesting thing about it is depending on the cost per, by the time you install them,
Yep.
it technically could be a capitalized item, and that's a question, because even though
Well, that's what I'm asking here.
it's
Do we want it to
recurring,
be-
recurring is not culverts in general, is that culvert recurring?
I
Okay,
understand.
so that one should not be touched again for 40 years.
Right, I hear.
You know what I'm
So my
saying?
suggestion.
And the
committee
reason,
to
and the
think about-
benefit of doing it that
Yep,
way.
yep.
Is that you're now planning and you get to carry the money over, like if other money isn't
Mm-hmm.
used, you're actually building your fund for drainage. Is what it amounts
I
to.
hear you. Okay.
That's kind of the reason I want to have certain things in there is primarily so that. Okay, this year we only did 5 culverts, but next year we do 15 and it levels out.
If I may, capital improvement, what we usually do, whether it's trucks, whether it's bridges, whether it's buildings, we usually save up so much money by investing it into an official capital reserve fund
Mhm.
that's been authorized by the voters. We salt money away and it builds up and then we spend it to buy a truck, or it builds up, we spend it to put up a building.
Yep.
With culverts, the smaller culverts, I do not see that process applying. We don't have a capital reserve fund.
Well, you
I-
do in that you have bridges and it should be
Ah,
bridges and large
bridges.
culverts.
Well, okay, the fund we
So-
have was only authorized for bridges.
Well, we may actually ask to
knowledge.
request it to
We
be
may.
bridges and culverts.
Well-
Because a bridge and a culvert, the only difference is no bottom.
I didn't get to finish. I would agree with you that we should add to the bridges list, any large culverts.
Okay.
That are but my suggestion is, because there are so many, because it's a recurring activity every year, picks 10 a year every year, because it's been in the general budget all along,
Right.
because we don't have a capital reserve fund that was ever authorized by the voters
Right.
to salt money away. And oh, by the way, what good is it to salt away $5,000 per year if you're gonna spend $5,000 per year? Then you're not
Well, no,
really.
that's
See what I'm
correct.
saying? So
But-
my suggestion to the committee, if I could, is that we only add large culverts to the bridge capital reserve. And that we leave all the rest of the smaller culverts as a general budget item, the way it has been. That's my suggestion. What does the committee think?
I agree with that.
You like that? What about you, Tom?
Well, ditches and culverts and bridges are all conceptually all part of the same thing. They're all part of their drainage.
Well, except for one thing, Bridges has an official capital reserve bank account that was authorized by the voters.
I understand
We
that.
put so much money into that bank.
I
account each year,
understand that.
And we spent
So
it,
why can't we do the same thing for culverts?
we would have to go back to the voters, in my opinion.
Yes, we would. Why not?
Would we want to do that?
Well,
Well,
why not?
I'm gonna say,
My answer is because we need to do X number of culverts every year,
So you've got,
10 per year,
so
every year.
you've got a revolving fund for a revolving problem, and
Okay,
it's,
I hear you.
and this is where the.
And
word-
my turn, my turn, my turn.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Sal. Please,
Okay.
Sal.
I think that Chet's on the right track with the, we should figure out how to add the big culverts to the bridges, and we can go to the voters to do that. I would like to see a Chet plan on what he's thinking about in terms of the smaller culverts and whether or not that would merit, another fund of some kind or other on a reserve basis.
If we were gonna, if we want to include it in a fund, I would include it in the bridges and culverts all together. Like if we decide we want to do that, because the one thing that I don't think has been done in the past, like we just paved South Road.
Mhm.
Okay. I have no idea what the condition of those culverts are. And did they
Oh, wow.
look at them before we did it? And was there any we should have replaced?
Yeah.
I hate cutting up paving. It's one thing that's a real problem. So whenever we're gonna do a road and rebuild that road, like let's say we're gonna, what is it, Switch Road's one
Yep.
that they want to reclaim and let it sit for a year.
Yep.
It's like any culverts that need to be replaced, plus we need to get them engineered because we're probably undersized. And things like that. And then the whole project becomes a capitalized project, then how do we deal with that?
All right, so in the interest of moving this along, I will agree with Sal that we'd like to see what
Yep.
your plan would be for smaller culverts.
Okay.
And whether or not and we will continue that discussion as to whether or not that will be part of the CIP program, smaller culverts.
Right.
Okay, because the last one, we need to move this along. Water and sewer, are we going to do, I'm sorry, lower cost equipment, things like laptops and printers and pumps and chainsaws that in the past, it was Mike Sampson's desire to keep them in the old tool we had so that at least he had an inventory of that stuff and he could keep an eye on it.
Mhm.
We never objected. We said, that's fine. There was no capital improvement money associated with it. It was almost all of it was less than the $5,000. And so on. So, but Mike wanted to put it in the tool. My question is, are we going to look at any of that equipment at all in this committee?
The only thing,
Small dollar stuff, I'll call it.
the small dollar stuff, I will say no.
Okay.
Okay. What I will say is some IT stuff,
Oh,
i.e.
servers, for
servers,
example, if they're over the,
that they all are
Agreed.
gonna qualify.
I'm asking about
So,
stuff that's
no,
below the.
That
threshold.
is basically, that's gonna be a tool for us to say, how much are we funding for IT budget? How much are we
Right.
funding for this equipment, that equipment?
So my question would be, are you maintaining inventory of smaller equipment like that someplace else other than the CIP tool?
I mean, right
Things
now,
like laptops, printers, et cetera.
on the IT stuff, we have an inventory.
Not just IT stuff, chainsaws, pumps.
That I don't have, I mean, the only thing we have is what,
Turnout gear for the fire department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
now turnout gear is an interesting one. Because that's expensive stuff.
But, I mean, but they were less than the $10,000 threshold that we might use.
But if you're buying, let's say you had to buy 10 of them, you're gonna spend $30,000.
I understand.
You know what I'm saying? And it's
The
like.
the
so
department
how
was
do you-
buying
how do
so
you-
many on a rolling basis, so many
And
a
if they're
year.
gonna do it that way.
That's what
then-
they've been doing.
And if they're doing that, then that will work. I don't have all of I'm not that
So,
far in yet.
Let's not stop at any one item. Think about this, ladders for the fire department, turnout gear, radios for policemen, printers, it's not
That's-
IT equipment. My question is stuff that's below the cutoff that we come up with.
Basically, the tool that
Are
was,
we-
that you
Yeah.
guys used last year is something we will expand upon.
You
as
use
we go
that
forward
tool to
for the
maintain an
time being,
inventory of
for
that
the
stuff,
little stuff.
separate from CIP.
That is correct.
That's my question. All right, good. That was the question of scope. Last one is water and sewer. Is this committee, do we need to review anything at all regarding water and sewer, or is that going to be managed completely separate?
My initial reaction is it should be reviewed by this group. And the reason is these are all town assets. The funding mechanism may be that we have grant funding, but in the case of the water that we're gonna be doing the special meeting for, the town is gonna have about a $700,000 match. and it's how we're gonna fund that. You know, and even though, you know, these things are paid for operationally by the users, the capital pieces of things should be tracked through capital budget, in my opinion.
Okay,
Does
does your tool have a category for water and sewer stuff?
well, I mean, we have
Like
the
it does
utilities one,
for-
but I haven't done the water system before, but we'll put the water system in it.
You will have, you
Yeah,
are planning,
because-
all right, so if you're part of a category of your CIP tool
Right.
for water and sewer capital stuff,
Right.
then we'll review that.
Right.
Okay, fine. All right,
That will be the most difficult one and probably the last one that's imported because it will require coordination with the engineer because we're actually gonna have to say, you know, how much of it is piping, how much of
Right.
it is tank replacement, how
Right.
much of it is this?
okay,
Because I think the capital budget committee making recommendations to the select board, hey, by the way, you know, you're getting near the end of life of the tank or whatever it is. Okay, and are you planning for it? And how are you dealing with your fees and
and
all of
that's
these
like
things
the
and how
building
you're
things,
addressing
for
it?
example, this committee won't know if we're getting near the end of life. That department head will need to identify that. To us, that a particular tank is
But
reaching.
what I
end
will
of life,
say
right?
is once the full model is built, the end of life, the expected life will be on there. You'll know
Sure.
you're at the end of
But
expected
who will
life.
determine that? The department head, right?
Well, they'll determine it in the setup and then they'll monitor as we go on
Correct,
and then
correct.
we'll
good.
basically be adjusting it.
That's
So
right,
it should take a lot of the opinion out of it
Right.
and make it more of a plan.
right,
This
right,
was kind of the goal.
right. That's good.
Hey, Claude, how about the transfer station? Is that something we need to look
Oh,
at?
thank you,
Oh,
thank
God.
you. I shouldn't, I overlooked that. Thank you, Sal. What about that?
Yes, you will be looking at that.
Yes, we will. That's in CIP, any capital equipment, the trailers,
Oh, my God.
the equipment,
That's
whatever.
just, that's gonna be a crap show. Sorry. We are, let's call it underwater, getting dunked.
We're underwater. I understand. But
And-
we
and
want a
that
category
location.
for transfer station
Yes.
in your tool.
Yeah.
How bad
But-
is that transfer station over there?
Well, here's the issue, okay. There's the condition, well, we just had one more trailer burn.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we did.
Okay,
Yes.
we lost, now
Yep.
we're down to one trailer.
Oh,
But the bigger issue is realistically, if you said, okay, we want to think about what do we want the transfer station to look like in 5 years?
Mhm.
It can look like nothing that we're doing today. It's got to be a complete overhaul because, okay, how are you gonna hire somebody with a Class A CDL for $24 an hour to manage that place? No one's gonna do that. They're getting $35 and $40 an hour.
Mm.
You know, we're not gonna be trucking our trash ourselves going forward. We have to come up with processes or contractors or however we're gonna do it. So we have to look at that entire process with a new lens, and it may require investment.
right. I
You know,
understand.
and we also haven't been funding, you know, replacement costs because,
No,
you know,
we're
like
not, right.
the tractor that he's using to tow these things on. It took 6 months to get a module to run the
Right.
the the brake sensor. So
Oh, wow.
it's like, and it's a 93.
Now, it
You know,
occurs
it's
to me
like-
that's a category that perhaps the town should consider a warrant article to establish a capital reserve account for transfer station investment. We don't have one right now.
Once we have a plan, I would, yeah, and it may be that we have to put it on the, and this will be part of
I'm getting
the
at.
process through the summer.
We might need to, yeah. That
We
that
may
might be a
actually-
warrant article to create another capital reserve bank account
Unless
for that.
we make it a subcategory of all facilities, you know, we maybe we modify the name of the building.
I hear you. However,
program.
I'm thinking there's tractors, there's trailers, there's equipment in the transfer station, plus
Yeah.
the actual infrastructure is how it's.
So then it's a public works subset, and I'm just
Yeah,
trying to figure out
yeah.
where to put it, so.
I'll leave
we'll
it to you to
figure
think on that
yeah.
and crunch on it, but
Because,
it may
yeah.
turn out to require another capital reserve.
Yeah,
investment.
Sal, I'll really thank you for bringing up the transfer station.
You're welcome.
Okay, we need to move on, guys, so we don't run out of time. How's it going with leasing the two? So far we've leased the backhoe and the grader.
Correct.
We haven't leased the two trucks that we were gonna lease yet, right?
They can't be leased and we can't, they're not gonna be built until next March.
Okay,
Because we couldn't get a build slot at Viking until next
that's,
March.
okay, got it.
So
All right.
we actually split it into 2 leases. The lease process has been. We got the lease approved, we got the equipment. And we don't make a payment until this time next year.
Really?
We did it in arrears.
Oh, really?
What I did was,
Okay,
one of the things we cannot do as a town is keep using fund balance to pay for things.
okay,
We need to get between 1.6 and $2.4 million in our account.
all right.
All right.
Absolutely.
And my thing was, is when I had the option. And the thing that they quoted turned out to be a $1 buyout, so it's a lease, but we don't turn them in at the end, we own them. Okay. And making the payment in arrears instead of an upfront payment, it put us into next year, which we were gonna have to put the payment in the budget anyway. And not be using fund balance. That was the goal.
Okay, so it's going along pretty well in that regard.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
so
this
far,
has
so
been relatively seamless.
Good,
and
good.
Basically, the
Okay.
only thing we haven't done, I guess we haven't done a lot of it because we haven't done much with financing. Is we have to go through bond council to get authorization letters, and we're gonna make sure he reviews any of our articles that we have to get financing for, so that it got a little messy in the middle of that for a little while, so.
It did.
We wanna
That's
make
what I
sure
was
that's
wondering
cleaner.
about. Okay, yeah, yeah.
So the money that we have in the budget now for the first payment, is that gonna be carried over?
Yes,
That's
because
all?
it
Yeah.
was basically coming out of fund balance, and
Yeah.
now we're just leaving it alone.
Okay.
But fund balance is getting assaulted anyway, because, we just paid $35,000 for a tax sale that happened 3 years ago that we never returned the overage money.
Oh,
No,
Okay, and then because we screwed that up and we screwed up the deeds, that the person who was damaged that bought it from the town has $10,000 worth of legal fees, so that'll be coming out of there as well.
oh, well,
So, and then we have several other sales at that same time that I believe none of those payments were made, and we're in the process of trying to calculate the damage from that.
why wouldn't that be money coming into the town as opposed to?
Okay,
payments?
because you are not allowed to keep the overage money.
Oh, the overage money. Thank you.
okay.
All of the
overage
overage money is
Understood.
still in our fund
I
balance
hear,
right
I
now.
hear, yeah, okay. Let's see, I'd like to go to number 9. We already talked about number 8, several times today. I want to, just say out loud that we are planning to conduct these meetings over Zoom. And hopefully Monica will be able to continue to help us with that, and that's great help. That's wonderful. Not just for Sal's participation, but I suspect as the season goes on, we're gonna have other members of the public who will participate, as they did last year.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Okay, number 10, proposed meeting schedule. There's 2 aspects of this. One is I threw out dates. I only announced today's meeting to the public until this committee agreed on what dates we want to use, but there's also a question of meeting time. Scott Johnston let me know that he was on it, that this was a bad time for him, 8:30 in the morning. Needs to be at work, and he was going to speak with Chet. So last chat, did you and Scott have that discussion? And what's your what's the
basically,
joint recommendation?
The conversation that we had before is what he basically agreed with. Like, he works till the end of the day. If we could be making it at like 3:30 or 4 o'clock, that works perfect for him.
He can make 4 o'clock meetings.
Yes.
Is that, so my question, I didn't want to decide, well, how does the committee feel about, let's start out with time of day first, 4 o'clock meetings, is that pretty good for the committee?
Well, let me ask this question first. Is Wednesday his only problem, or does he work every day?
Every day.
Every day, Monday through Friday, 6:30 AM until 5 PM, he told me he's at work.
He told me that, given, especially since he's not doing a lot of traveling right now, but he can do the end of the day, like he comes in once in a while for meetings.
As long as he knows in
scheduled like
advance
3, 4 o'clock, yes.
what day it's gonna be, right?
But there-
So that's why I'm talking time of day first, Sal, it's every day. So is 4 o'clock okay with you, Sal?
I don't particularly have any plans on any of these
Yeah.
days at 4 o'clock yet. No.
How long would we run then? Do
Same as this, I
5:30?
found in the past 1 hour is never really enough,
an
so I
hour
would plan an hour and a half. Is that okay with
till
everybody?
5:30? That's fine, yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, well, that's provided, I guess, that the room is available, right?
Well, we'll have to try to.
Yeah,
make-
we'll get and that'll be.
We'll try to get the rooms
there,
reserved, but we will aim for, and we'll work on it. Okay, so we'll aim for 4 o'clock meetings, I will say. Now, what about the dates I proposed? I proposed 1 in July, 2 in August, middle and late, 1 in September in the middle, and then 2 in October, because in October is when we need to be finalizing everything and beginning to generate the final report. How did those dates strike you guys?
Is that about what we did last year?
Wednesdays, it's about what we did last year, yes, sir.
I
Yes.
think that should be sufficient.
I mean, we can always, as time goes along, if we decide in July we need another meeting, well, we'll schedule one. We just need enough time to notify the public. But what I would do is notify the public of all of these meetings as soon as we check on room availability and so on. So that we can notice the public once, on the wall and on the website, wherever else. And if we have to add a meeting somewhere along the line, that can be done. Or cancel a meeting for that matter, that can be done. But we need to have a tentative set of meetings like the budget committee does, right?
Yeah, we'll be starting ours since like September 5th,
Right.
and it'll be coming.
And
right
there's
at
a series of meetings that
Yeah.
get published in advance. Point is, it's not set in stone, but we need to have a tentative set of meetings and we can reserve the room once for different dates and that kind of thing. So,
I can start reserving the ones.
so these are Wednesday dates that I have on here.
The
That
only
little
date
beat.
that I would just want to add a caveat to is July 10th. Just because we're gonna be really early into the process and I don't know how much information we're gonna be able to. We'll have information to start sharing with you.
I could postpone it 1 week to the 17th, maybe if you were.
I'm
if
just saying,
that's what
like,
you
anything
advise,
you
or-
give us time wise, because we're still building from scratch a
I
little bit.
understand,
So
right.
it's just, that's the only one that's maybe a little tight for.
So why don't we say
information.
July 17th?
That'll work better.
And then August 14th, is that better?
Yep.
All right, we'll go to June 12th was today. July 17th then would be our next meeting and hopefully you'll get the model as
The
complete
model,
as you can by then.
the draft model will be there for you, and at the very least,
Some
it's going to
numbers,
give
right?
us, say, this is what we should putting away in each of the categories.
Right.
We,
Got it.
that's kind of my initial goal, and then we're actually gonna kind of fill in some of the stuff as we go through this and start identifying what things that we want to prioritize and any changes we want to make.
I think it would be helpful to go through the plan first
Right.
before we start trying to put stuff into it.
Right,
So we have an understanding of what the plan really, I
Right.
mean, you've explained it to us today,
right.
but to really work
Well,
with
actually
it
look
and
at
see how it works
Correct.
before we
Well,
need
that's-
to start putting in.
Right, and that's
numbers.
kind of why I hope to do on the first meeting is to
Right.
basically just,
I think-
we're gonna do like an we're gonna try and look at the report card. for lack of a
Educate the
better word.
committee.
Right,
Right,
You
in
know.
detail using the actual model.
right.
Yes.
And then taking the information that we've
Okay.
been provided by Guy and everybody else and saying, this is where we are.
Okay, well, with that, it's almost 10 o'clock. That's everything I had on the agenda. Does anybody have any other important business to raise?
I have two things, quickly. Chet, if, you can get us the spreadsheets, a couple of days before we meet. I personally like to just, thumb through it, just to get familiar with it. So if there's any chance before the meeting, 2-3 days.
I'm in a meeting. I'll have to call you back.
All right, so I'd like to, my request is
My-
basically to,
My only comment to that would be, I probably would prefer not to do it for the first meeting.
okay,
Because it's a process meeting, and then you'd have everything you want, like, okay, if we're doing equipment this time, you'll have that whole section.
all right, that's
You don't
fine.
think
And
you'll have
then,
any of the actual numbers for the July, the equipment costs or projected?
Oh, I thought it'll
You'll-
all be in
All
there.
right, it's
When I
not
say when
just
it's
the price.
built.
I mean, it'll be our first look at the actual numbers.
It's gonna be your first look
Right.
at, this is what the replacement costs of what we have is
Right.
on an annual basis.
But it will also predict which items will be needed replaced in which future years. Will that be in there?
Not 100%.
First
sure.
cut,
First
first
cut,
cut.
maybe.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm,
Yeah.
all right,
along
the
with
second
that,
thing,
the
I mean, the equipment side will be, I don't have all the roads prioritized per se for
first
paving
cut,
yet,
and
so,
some categories might have nothing in them yet.
oh, they'll all
in
have
July.
stuff in them.
All right,
The
Right,
issue
second-
is, because the real issue is,
we'll get you some.
what do we need to be appropriating on a
Just so-
per
Right,
section
Mhm.
basis, like if it's bridges, what do we need to appropriate, and.
so it'll
So
be
the
clearly
best part is the
education.
bridges is, we need to start putting appropriations away, but this first round couldn't be a better situation, because getting 3 new bridges over the next 3 years and the town's paying virtually nothing.
Right.
But then, then there are responsibility going forward.
They are?
Yeah.
I thought they were always state bridges, but even in the future,
Not that I'm aware of.
it was well, we'll have to
And
look
we'll
into
find that out. I'll look into that, but I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
they're, yeah.
But
And
they
if
should
it,
all also have a 30 or 40 year life too.
80,
80.
typically a
Right,
60
fine,
to
fine.
80, so it's.
So it'll be education, as Tom said,
Yeah.
and it'll be a first cut look at
Mhm.
whatever numbers you can get from department heads and so on between now and July.
Right.
Okay, Sal,
The other thing was, last year, Hugh and Guy put together a, update on the status of all the equipment. A document, a Word document, that had repairs and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've seen that yet,
Yes, I have.
but it was very helpful for us, both in the CIP process and in the budget process, to see their thoughts on, what was going on. I don't know if that's something that we might be able to get our hands on again or get them to do.
Well, Guy was the one who had done a lot of the legwork on that, and he's still working with us on a contracted basis, and I've already talked to him, and he's gonna also help with this process.
Great,
So
fantastic,
We should be able to get the same information updated with the new purchases.
fantastic, great. That would be great. Thank you.
so I'll go back to Sal's first point. I understand you said you'd rather not the first time, but even if you could just rethink that, I would like to get a look at your spreadsheet on my computer at home ahead of time. I'd be much better prepared to participate in a meeting when I come
Mhm.
than sitting here looking at it up there for the first time ever.
If I send it to you, the issue isn't, is it okay for you to look at? The
Right.
issue is knowing where anything is, because everything's separate pages, like paving has its own page. And-
Sure.
And then there's the master worksheet,
Right,
and
right.
there's what gets printed in the book.
Right.
All of those things are listed in
Well,
here,
can we
so-
try it?
Oh, we can try it.
Send it out
Have
to
at
this
it.
committee,
Yeah.
me, Sal, Tom.
And they'll all be password protected, so nobody can mess with formulas.
Right. Well, we won't, but you'll
I
have.
don't wanna
the-
mess
no
with
matter
anything.
what.
Right, yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, I have no problem with it, it's just a matter of,
Right.
we'll see how it looks.
That, maybe we'll get nothing out of it, but I personally feel that I would
Okay.
come to the meeting better prepared to participate and to ask questions than if I've never seen it before when I'm sitting here looking at
Right.
the.
Well,
Then- then I
that
can
question
send
is it ready? I thought you, I
July.
understood you to say it was
This
still
is for
being
July
worked on.
17th.
No, we're
This is for
asking
July
you-
17th.
Well, my question is, will it be ready? That's
It will be draft form
Actually,
ready, at
draft form.
least. Yeah.
draft form, okay.
And
That's
that's
good.
all we're asking is, can you share the draft with us? A
I
couple
could,
days before the
absolutely, I
meeting.
just, I kind of just wanted to give you an
That would be
introduction
nice.
of how it works and how it's set up one
Understood.
time.
Yeah,
So
no, we
It
understand.
wasn't,
yeah.
it wasn't a
We
matter
understand.
of trying to keep it a secret, it was
No,
just
no,
like,
we
I
didn't
thought it
think
was
so.
better to give you the.
But again,
The
from my
map.
point of view, I would have the ability to look at it, think
Okay.
about it, and just be better prepared again to participate in the meeting.
Yeah, I
Okay,
feel the same way, Chet.
all right, that's fine,
All right,
we can
good.
do that.
With that, we have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Tom makes a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Mark seconds. All in favor?
Aye, aye.
Aye. We're done.
Thank you, gentlemen.